Let's dive right in. What we have here is a pretty dramatic story, a real cautionary tale about how one of the world's richest nations, a place that's literally a symbol of culture and the good life, ended up in some serious economic trouble. We're going to unpack the fall of the French economy.
You know, it wasn't that long ago that France really was living the dream. Just picture it. Incomes were skyrocketing, they were co-building supersonic jets like the Concorde, and every single worker was guaranteed 4 weeks of paid vacation. It was pretty much the gold standard for a good middle-class life. But if you fast forward to today, well, the reality is just shockingly different. The GDP has been basically flat since 2008, a staggering 1 out of every 3 people say they can't afford 3 healthy meals a day, and unemployment is this constant, nagging crisis, especially for young people.
So the big question is, how? How did that dream turn into this really difficult reality? What in the world went wrong with the French economic miracle? That's exactly what we're going to figure out. Okay, so to really understand the fall, you first have to appreciate just how high they climbed. So let's take a quick trip back to those glory days, a time when France wasn't just a cultural powerhouse, but a true industrial and economic giant.
Now, get this. This number is just wild. Between 1960 and 1980, the average income for a person in France grew 12-fold. Not 12%, 12 times. That's an absolutely astonishing level of prosperity, and it created this huge consumer society where things like cars, TVs, and modern appliances became normal for just about everyone.
And this is a great snapshot of how they did it. I mean, France was on the cutting edge of technology, co-building revolutionary planes like the Airbus and Concorde. They owned the global luxury market, and the government had this powerful promise. Even if you were born poor, there was a clear path to a great life through top-tier schools and huge government-backed industrial projects. But then, the first major shock hit the system. The 1973 oil crisis sent shockwaves across the entire global economy. And at this exact moment, this fork in the road, France and its neighbor, Germany, chose 2 completely different paths. This is where their economic stories really start to split apart.
So here's the quick backstory. After World War II, the French economy was absolutely flying. But in 1973, war in the Middle East leads oil-producing nations to slash their supply. And boom, oil prices quadrupled practically overnight, jumping from $3 a barrel to 12. The whole world was suddenly in a massive energy crisis.
Now, France had a very unique policy to protect its workers from all this rising inflation. It was called the sliding scale of wages. And the logic, it seems pretty fair, right? If the cost of living goes up, your wages automatically go up by the exact same amount to match. But this well-intentioned policy, it was about to send the French economy down a very dangerous path.
The 2 strategies here could not have been more different. France went all in on protecting workers' paychecks, raising wages right alongside inflation, and printing tons of money to keep people spending. Germany, on the other hand, took the tougher road. Workers there actually accepted pay raises that were below inflation, the government was super careful about printing money, and they kept taxes low on businesses to help them stay afloat.
And the results? They were immediate, and they were dramatic. Because French wages were so high, French products became really expensive for the rest of the world to buy. Meanwhile, German products suddenly became way more competitive. By 1977, France was already running a big trade deficit, buying more than it was selling. And Germany? It had turned into an export superpower with a massive $19 billion surplus.
So just as Europe was kind of adjusting to this new reality, a second, even bigger shockwave hit: globalization. And it was supercharged by China opening its economy to the world. For industries in the West, this became a real survival of the fittest moment.
And once again, France and Germany made completely opposite choices. Germany, which at the time was being called the sick man of Europe, went through some really painful but necessary reforms. They cut unemployment benefits, they made labor laws more flexible, and workers again accepted low wage increases. France did the exact opposite. They doubled down on the good life. They actually shortened the work week to 35 hours for the same pay and made it a legal nightmare for companies to fire anyone.
And this is where that abstract policy gets painfully real. The firing laws were so rigid that a worker could sue their employer, and a judge could hit a small business, I'm talking about a local bakery, with a fine of up to 100,000 euros, just for letting one person go. The result of that? Business owners became terrified to hire anyone in the first place.
And this chart just perfectly illustrates the long-term result. While Germany managed to keep its industrial base strong, it still makes up almost 19% of its economy, France's industrial sector just withered.
Manufacturing now accounts for less than 10% of its entire GDP. Its factories just couldn't compete anymore.
All right, then came the 2008 financial crisis, and this is where France adopted what you might call the painkiller strategy. Instead of actually treating the underlying economic sickness, it just used massive amounts of debt to numb the pain. This analogy really captures the difference perfectly. Germany acted like a disciplined athlete. It felt the pain of the crisis, it put strict caps on government spending, and it used the opportunity to actually start paying down its national debt. France, on the other hand, acted like an athlete who just takes painkillers. It avoided all the hard reforms and instead spent billions in borrowed money on freebies to basically pretend the crisis wasn't even happening.
And the numbers here are just mind-boggling. We are talking about 75 billion euros just to cap electricity bills, another 17 billion in tax cuts and bonuses after some protests. They paid nearly all private sector salaries during the pandemic. All told, in just a handful of years, France spent up to 200 billion euros on handouts, all of it funded by going deeper into debt.
So, after this whole journey, what's the takeaway? What can we all learn from France's story? What are the key lessons here for any nation, really? It seems to all come down to three big lessons. First, accepting some short-term pain is often way better than getting buried under long-term debt. Second, governments have to focus on building real economic resilience, not just temporary comfort, even when the policies to do that are unpopular. And third, you have to beware the freebie. Those easy solutions that are funded by debt almost always create the hardest problems down the road.
And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? The temptation for politicians to just give out handouts is incredibly powerful, but it can be an absolutely disastrous strategy for a country's future. It's a stark reminder that when it comes to lasting prosperity, there really is no easy path.